Great regular seasons. That's what we've become accustomed to as Milwaukee Brewer fans and in the media covering the team. Teams that go through the regular season and give you high hopes only to cut our hearts out in the playoffs. We'll talk about that and our guest, Kevin Holden, longtime sportscaster in Milwaukee. We'll get to him coming up next here on Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good to have you on here on Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. This episode brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even though you might not like the sports teams there. But, man, some of these cities, St. Louis, Philadelphia, even Chicago. Yes, even Chicago. Great places to visit. May not like the sports teams, but you can get around to those towns real easy through Booking.com. Our guest today, Kevin Holden, affectionately known as Holdy. I invented that nickname with Holdy. Holdy joining us right now, longtime sports director in the city of Milwaukee, Spanish TV, play-by-play of the Milwaukee Brewers. Kevin does it. Packers as well, he does. Kevin, how you doing?
And it's all good, Freems. It's a great time to talk sports anytime. Obviously, a great time for you and I to catch up. But, we got a bit going on here with this. We've got to October, and all of a sudden we've got free time here early while the division series is going on. Instead of covering it or watching or, seeing it in this city, we're watching it happen elsewhere.
So disappointing. The theme of this podcast, Kevin, is great regular season. What happens the postseason? Used to be, hey, let's get a bite of the apple. Let's get to the postseason. Well, yeah, not that getting to the postseason is old hat by any means, but it's getting pretty old, this team, Kevin, busting out early in the postseason.
Well, if you're talking about this, the last 5 or 6 years of this team, yeah, that theme has just been really, it's been overwhelming. And the crazy part about it is if you're going back, so 2018 was that first year that this modern current Brewers iteration busted onto the scene, and they make it to Game 7 of the NLCS, and that's the good stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
They take the Dodgers right to the limit, and after that, it was Trent Grisham in a 1-game exit in 2019, and a 2-game exit in the pandemic in 2020, and 1 win against the Braves in 2021, and missing the playoffs in 2022, losing 2 straight to the Diamondbacks 2023, winning only 1 against the Mets in 2024. So if I'm counting my numbers right, that is a total of 2 playoff wins from 2019 to 2024, 3 playoff wins. So it is 2. That's crazy. 2.
Yeah, they beat one game against Atlanta and then 1 game here against the Mets. And the game against the Mets in Game 2, they almost lost that one.
Right. It took a couple of bombs late. It took the Mets bullpen collapsing late to do it. And so here's the thing. I kind of look at this a couple of different ways. I would prefer to see my team sometime in October versus not seeing them in October,
Mm-hmm.
in places where they get to the end of the regular season and it's football season. That's it. But the other half is baseball has changed a lot of things, but one of them is the structure of the way the playoffs operate. So here's what I go to when they're on the field celebrating the division title. The day that Bowers had the walk-off hit, they had already won the division title, but he had the walk-off hit, and then they threw streamers and they celebrated. And we're live on the air that day, that night, and I said, in the first, I don't even remember the number now, the first 40-something years of Brewers history, they made 5 playoff appearances. And now in the last 6 seasons, they will have made 5 playoff appearances. And then I stopped and I thought, that sounds really cool. But the situation was different. When the Brewers made it in 1981, 1982, you had division winners, right? It went straight to the LCS. There were a grand total of 4 teams that made the postseason. Now there are a grand total of 12 teams that make the postseason. And this year, because of the Braves and Mets, it was really 13, right? Because the Braves and Mets played those 2 games to get in. So the standard has been lowered. Now, that's not to take anything away from the Brewers winning the Central, because that's still the goal, and they did accomplish their goal. But when you get to the playoffs, you're not one of 4 anymore. You're one of 12. And if your weaknesses get exposed, then it says a little something about what's going on. It's not that the Brewers aren't successful. It's that their level of success gets to here. And then when you get to that next round, someone usually with more experience or a higher payroll or whatever you want to say has been tripping them up. They've lost to the Mets. They've lost to the Nationals. They've lost to the Braves. And all those teams, by the way, every single one of them has made the World Series. The Brewers have never lost in the playoffs to a team that hasn't made the World Series at least.
Mm-hmm.
But again,
the Mets might be on their way.
Dude, all of a sudden they're taking it to the Phillies, and they've had like 1 day of rest in the last 2 weeks. It's crazy, but yeah, to me the standard is lowered a little bit. Making the playoffs is like, hey, you're the upper half of baseball, cool.
Good point that you make, because people will always ask me, Chuck, where does this team stack up to teams in yesteryear? Well, because there's been playoff expansion, and you mentioned back in the 80s, and I'll go back in the late 70s. There were better teams in the 70s, late 70s, into the mid 80s that were better than these teams that didn't get, because you had 2 teams from each league. Strange to think about it now, but yeah, you had 2 teams from each league. In 81, you had 4 teams because you had a split season because of the strike. But still, you had lesser teams make the playoffs back then, so you might have had more postseason teams, but some of those teams were better than this team. But the bottom line is they're going to the postseason right now, Kevin, and they're putting up these great regular seasons. How can we buy into a regular season anymore when even the last couple of years, I hear it on Twitter and I hear it on this show. Yeah, Chuck, but what are these guys going to do in the postseason? Oh, this year is going to be different. Oh, but what are they going to do this year? Another failure. 2023. What are they going to do? Oh, they're going to add Arizona. Oh, they should move on from this series. They're out in 27 hours. Oh, 2024. This is going to be a great year. They win 93 games. They do so many things correctly. This is the year. And then they have the Mets come in here, a supposedly tired Mets team, wipe us out in 3 games. So how can you take these regular seasons serious anymore? It's like, yes, it's great, but show me in October.
Yeah, I think Major League Baseball has a little bit of the onus on this one. Would say that they've created a system where more playoff games means more money.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it boils down to. And if you can pull that money into 12 teams, 12 markets, as opposed to 4, it's beneficial. It gives you more television exposure time. All that stuff is there. But what they've created is a system where some weird things have gone on. We look at exactly where we are right now in these playoffs. And it's a perfect example of the system that Major League Baseball has created, both good and bad. You got a ton of teams in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a system where the Brewers won their division, and their reward, because their record was a couple of games worse than the Dodgers and the Phillies, their reward was to turn right back around and play a team streaming into the playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
No rest at all if you were the Brewers. And that happened against the Diamondbacks last year. Same thing. They won the division. Congratulations. Go on to the playoffs right now. 12 teams in, and you got to play immediately. That's an issue. If they improve by a couple of games, they can help that. But that is part of the problem. Here's the other. This division series that's going on right now is showing you a kind of a dark side of what baseball's playoffs can be. The Mets and Phillies are division rivals. The Dodgers and Padres are division rivals. The Tigers and Guardians are division rivals. So what you're doing is taking the second place team in the division, or I think the Tigers were the 3rd place team in their division,
Mm-hmm.
giving them this advantage of turning right back around and playing the division winner in this first full round of playoffs. That's way different than what used to be there. And so what's happening is the 162 game team, the one that finished first, if they catch a cold spot in October, then that second place team or third place team that gets a little hotter in October has a chance to go on. And literally, we are about to see a situation where the Mets are a win away, the Mets are a win away, and the Tigers are 2 wins away. And if they do, 3 division champions go down, and 3 teams that did not win their division go to the league championship series. If you want it that way, that's fine, but that's on baseball for creating that system.
Well, I wonder what can be done, because there's got to be more to. If you win your division, there should be a bigger reward. Yeah. And not that I'm trying to, and Holden, not that I'm trying to find excuses and find an easier way for the Brewers to get in, but in a way I am. shouldn't there be a better reward? Somehow these geniuses can figure out if you win a division title that you get more than a 2-game shot at it.
Well, all right. So if you want my madman scientist approach to it, I can give it to you.
Yeah.
Here's how I think baseball's best approach to doing it is to do this. You have 30 teams in Major League Baseball. Let's get 2 more. Let's get to 32, and let's split off into 4-team divisions. You can keep your American League, National League, and give me North, South, East, West. I don't care how you split it. 4-team divisions, 4 in each league. Those division champions, that's 8 teams, move on to the playoffs and don't play in the first round. If you win your division, you don't play in the first round of the playoffs. And then you sort the rest out from there. Do you get 4 other teams in from each league? Now we're up to 16, which is a ton. But, maybe you figure out another way, like there's a play-in that comes into it with 2 wild cards or something like that. But at least give a division winner a chance to do something big, because, yeah, to me that's significant. You battle for 162 games, and the Brewers and Mets took different paths. The Brewers were good enough in their division to clinch with a week and a half left, which means they took their foot off the gas. And Pat Murphy admitted it, right? There was a point where they took their foot off the gas in the regular season. The Mets had to battle to the last out of a they had to fly to Atlanta and play 2 and battle to the last out and come back. Difference in adrenaline between the teams is massive.
Yeah.
And that's the playoff system worked against the Brewers in this case. They came in not rested, but a little bit rusted in my mind. So that's my plan. 32 teams and division winners don't play the first round.
Holy, I like it. I like it. That's why you're the Spanish voice of Brewers baseball. It's because of genius ideas like that right there, my friend. Good idea. I like it. Let's get some reward for winning a division. Holden, hang on one second. I got to do a quick break here. Chuck Freeman, along with Kevin Holden, longtime sportscaster in Milwaukee, joining us here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Locked On Brewers, you get us on various platforms out there: Google, Spotify, Apple, wherever you download your podcast, that's where we are. And for those of you who download the audio version, go to YouTube, search Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That'll alert you every time we drop an episode on Locked On Brewers. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book for a reason. FanDuel, right now you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Y'all like the Mets yesterday to win Game 3. And I know it was a pick'em game. Everybody wanted to jump on Philly, but the Mets appeared to be the play. Well, if you put $5 in that game, win or lose, whether you put Philly or the Mets, you would have got $200 in bonus bets. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can also check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, so much more on the same page where you place your bets on America's #1 sports book, FanDuel.com. Football, college football on Saturdays. We got football going on for the next we got a game going on once a day, at least one game every day for the next 44, 45 days now. A lot of football fans out there in our great state of Wisconsin. College basketball starting up as well. Get in on all the action on FanDuel.com. FanDuel, again, the bonus bets, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel, visit FanDuel.com. Also, the Gametime app. When I like to go to games, the Gametime app helps me out immensely. Whether I want to sit around the dugout and take my 13-year-old kid to the game, he always wants to sit behind the visitors' clubhouse for a dugout for a reason. I don't know why. He prefers the visiting team, but we go there when the Reds or the Blue Jays are in town. Some of his teams that he enjoys watching, he likes watching Ellie De La Cruz. Again, I prefer to watch the Brewers, but you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the discount. All you got to see, you see all these prices on the app. Where do you want to sit? I want to sit behind the dugout right there. Boom, you click on the section, and out pops a bunch of different seats that you could choose from, and prices all in pricing as well. The all in pricing, you just got to turn on that feature on the app, and you will have it right there. But you got to download the Gametime app right now. Create an account. Use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Gametime. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB, $20 off your purchase. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? It is game time. And Kevin Holden from longtime sportscaster here in Milwaukee, and the Spanish TV voice of the Milwaukee Brewers, does great work. And we are glad to have a few moments of his time here talking Brewers baseball. And the theme of today's show is, with the Brewers, how do we get over this hump? How do we get by the first round? Getting to the playoffs is just no longer acceptable. It is no longer acceptable. They got to start winning some playoff series. We got great fans going to all these games, but we're not getting rewarded with playoff victories. Kevin, what do you see anything organizationally that's got to be done? It looks like the pieces are in place. This team's got a young team for years to come. What else needs to happen?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from here, the next step from here, is to get a combination of things for the pitching staff. One is health, because man, the injuries were an issue. It took out Woodruff, it took out Jacob Junis, it took out DL Hall. Like some of the plans that they made didn't come to fruition, and that does have to factor in that they managed to squeeze the season out of Tobias Myers, and they were pulling dudes, and then they went bargain hunting for Frankie Montas and Aaron Savali, who were great pickups. They both did terrific work for the Brewers, but you're just building a rotation doing that. You're just you're just trying to find someone to fill the spots, and they did well finding the guys that worked. But I think somewhere there's got to be a middle ground on that front, which is I understand the Brewers aren't going to be able to spend $300 million for a starting pitcher. It doesn't work for the economics of the game. But I think that they can be benefited by getting some of the veteran guys in that in-between range that can help them in the playoffs. Because what I was watching in that Mets series was this. I was seeing in game one, I was watching Freddie Peralta, clear ace, who, struggled at times with stuff during the year, but still the ace.
Yeah.
Luis Severino. Okay, so that works out for me. Then you get to games 2 and 3, and you start to see where the difference is. You see Sean Manaea on the other side. You see Jose Quintana in a deciding game on the other side. And Jose Quintana, on top of being a Brewer killer, was just the wrong guy for the Brewers to face in that situation. Crafty lefty, keeps the ball in the strike zone. You got your young, aggressive hitters swinging at pitches off the plate or low. And that's where it is, right? And that's veteran pitching. Sometimes the money that's paid in baseball isn't paid. It's paid for the talent, but it's also paid for the experience. And the experience can mean something. I think that's one of the things, right? You've got to find something in there, in that pitching staff where you can spend a little bit of money. So the two things for me, health for the pitching staff helps everybody. I have no qualms with the offense. I think the Brewers remind me of the mid-late 2000s Brewers. They're going to be healthy and really good on offense for years to come. But the pitching needs to be healthy, and they need to figure out something where maybe a few more dollars get spent in there, because if you can get a Jose Quintana without spending $300 million, and he can win you a playoff game.
Well, I'd love to have Frankie Montas back.
Yeah.
Made $20 million this past year, but they're not going to, they don't want to pay. They're not paying $20-30 million for pitching. That's just the way it is.
And his shoulder is I think, still a question mark. And that's the problem. Is if 2019 Frankie Montas or 2020 Frankie Montas was there in the playoffs, that dude would have dominated. But I think the shoulder is in kind of rough shape. It's a fixable thing. It just, at this jump.
But the price tag's too high too. I mean, the price, he's going to be commanding on that. Now, if he got to opening day, or if he got to spring training and there was nothing out there for him, you might get, the Brewers are always settling for these bargain basement type deals.
Yeah. And they're good ones, right? And they have pulled some guys off the scrap heap.
Colin Ray was
phenomenal this year.
Yeah.
There was a game late in September when that Brewers bullpen was upside down, and Colin Ray, I'll just go get whatever it was, 7 or 8.
The clincher.
Yeah. It was amazing, right? That Colin Ray is the exact kind of guy. And the Brewers do a good job, I think, when they research on finding the guys who fit as well. It's not 100%, obviously, because Jesse Winker was a Brewer for a year, but but they for the most part, they find these good fits. And there's, you can have a Colin Ray to round out the rotation, but if you get a good 2 and 3 starter, and you do it without spending $300 million, you're in good shape. They pitching wise, they're going to be better next year. Woodruff, if he's back and can contribute anything at all, he instantly.
I'm hoping, but I'm not counting on Woody. I'm just not counting on him. I think they need to go out there and spend. I think they need a bat. I really do. I think, and I mentioned Alex Bregman. If he becomes a free agent, doesn't sound like he's coming back to Houston. I would love for him to play third base. And if you paid him 4 years, $120 million, I would be good with that. He's 30 years old. His batting average has gone down, career low. But I think whether it's Bregman or someone, you need to buy a big stick somewhere in the middle of that lineup, because I don't know if you can count on Christian Yelich, even though he's coming back from surgery.
Yeah, because we're starting to reach that age now, and there have been some injuries with the back and so on that make him where he can, if he's healthy, he'll be a contributor. But can you count on that health? I don't know. So here's one thing I think that'll help the payroll situation, and I hope I'm not like overstepping with this, but the announcement that the Brewers are swapping out of Bally Sports Wisconsin and having MLB handle the production of their television broadcast. I know to the casual observer, there's like, why are you talking about television when it comes to, the team's success on the field?
Mm-hmm.
These days, television money is absolutely essential. And all of this threat of Bally Sports going bankrupt in these different markets and not making payments in these different markets, and how they affected the Rangers and the Diamondbacks and the Guardians and, these other teams. I think financial stability comes with MLB doing this production. The Brewers are changing the means by way that they'll get the money, the television money for these deals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more stable. They're going to feel a lot more confident going out and getting an Alex Bregman. If you've got $30 million extra coming in and it's going to be there and there's not going to be default payments, then I think you feel better going and getting a guy. So I think this TV announcement helps the Brewers financially.
It does. It's never going to overcome them being in a small market. That's for sure. And that's always going to be, and the fact that there's no salary cap. And I've talked about that ad nauseum, but we'll get to that. We'll get to more down the home stretch where the Brewers are headed in the offseason. Throw a couple of questions off Kevin, and we return after this timeout. One more segment with Kevin Holden after this here on Locked On Brewers. Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Booking.com. Booking.com, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Even your baseball rivals going to a city like St. Louis or Chicago or Philadelphia, those are good cities to visit. You might not like their sports teams, but the right stay can make you a fan of any city. Booking.com. Yeah, man, they got it all there. Hotels, accommodations, wherever you want to go. Let's say you want to go up to Door County. Booking.com. They got bed and breakfasts on there. Resorts. Maybe you want to, in the summertime, a golf resort in northern Wisconsin, or how about a golf resort in Scottsdale? I found some really good ones on Booking.com. So whether you're going to take a vacation this winter or maybe a little retreat up to Door County or northern Wisconsin, Booking.com is the place to go. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com. Get in on all the action on Booking.com. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And down the stretch we come. Kevin Holden, our guest here, for a couple of more moments before we let him go here on Locked On Brewers. Kevin, 93 wins. Would you say that's a disappointment when you don't make the when you make the postseason and you bust out like they do? Does that overshadow what they did in the regular season to you?
I mean, that's the problem is when it happens enough times in a row, it becomes a thing. It's bigger than a single play. And I think the biggest thing that could have happened to this Brewers team, because they are young and talented and the future is extremely bright. The biggest thing for them was nothing more than to beat the Mets in a first round series. And the reason why is next year and the year after, when Churio and Frelick and Garrett Mitchell and Bryce Terang and on and on and on are older or 2 years older and wiser and better, all they're going to hear is, well, the Brewers haven't won a playoff series since 2018. And so not to hop sports, but the turning point in the Bucks timeline with Giannis was 2019, because they finally won a playoff series. Up until that point, every time the Bucks had made the playoffs as the young core had gotten better, they won a playoff series since 2001. And you hear that. There's no way you can't hear that or experience that for the franchise that you play for. I think if they'd beaten the Mets in the first round and they had that off their back next year, they can take a step forward next year. So in terms of disappointment, I think that's where the disappointment is. They got to hear that for another year.
I think this team, and you're watching the Mets right now, going into this, they're playing Game 4 against Philadelphia, but they're up 2-1. I looked at that. Why couldn't that have been us? That could have been the Brewers. This team was capable of going to the World Series. They had the talent. They don't have to take a back seat to anybody, but they just can't get over that hump.
And they have, if you flip it around and you give the Brewers a win in that series against the Mets, and they're the ones taking on the Phillies are hanging back and waiting for the long ball. They had to through the first round of the playoffs, and they were an example of a team that got a little rusty in a similar way, right? In this case, the Brewers would be the team hot coming off a series win. The Phillies weren't part of the wild card series, so they had that time off. And their bullpen struggled. The Phillies bullpen struggled right off the top, and they've struggled a bit throughout this series. And the Brewers would have taken advantage of that. I think I could easily see the Brewers being exactly where the Mets are, 2-1.
Yeah.
Right? The Phillies with a chance to close it out.
Holdy, we'll catch up with you down the road, my friend. Say hello to your lovely wife, Blazer. Haven't seen her in a while, but keep going strong. And I appreciate you taking a couple of minutes and joining us and all our great Brewers fans. I know they love hearing from you.
Yeah, anytime, Freems. I appreciate it. And by the way, your Gametime app has saved my bacon about 3,000. I love that app, dude.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for the show today. Chuck Freeman here at Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. We're here every day for all you everydayers. Follow me on Twitter, Chuck Freeman, FREIMUND. And of course, for your next listen, Locked On MLB, our guy Sully's got all the baseball playoff coverage right there on Locked On MLB. That'll do it. We'll talk to you tomorrow, everybody. Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.